I'm the only one who remembers Hank Scorpio, so his memory dies with me. I write this not as a cry for help, but as an echo cast into a void that I can no longer traverse. The room around me is quiet in the suffocating way that empty cathedrals are quiet, where even the smallest movement seems sacrilegious. The only sounds are the scratching of my pen and the low electric hum of the lamp beside me. The sickly yellow bulb that flickers every few minutes. If this was any other time, it would bug me and I would fix it immediately, but right now, all I can think is how much I resonate with it. It's as if the light itself is growing tired of existing. They say memory is a fickle thing. They say it's a treasure we hold dear until it withers away. A photograph left too long in the sun, a voice fading at the end of a hallway. Yet, what surrounds me now is not fading. It is decaying. My memories are rotting the way fruit rots, slowly, silently, until one day you notice that the sweet smell has turned sour. Pieces fall away, shapes collapse inward, what was once vibrant becomes soft, bruised, and unrecognizable. My name is Ellie, and I served alongside the legendary Hank Scorpio in Cypress Creek before all of the madness. Even writing his name feels dangerous now. The letters look almost foreign on this page, as if they belong to some language the world has agreed to forget. But I remember him, with a clarity so sharp it hurts. I remember the way the corridors of the compound vibrated with distant machinery, the sterile scent of ozone and polished steel, the endless glow of monitors reflecting in the glass walls of his office. I can also remember his laughter. I don't think I'll ever forget that laugh. Hank's laughter was the kind that filled a room completely. Not cruel, not mocking, but bright and unrestrained. Like a man who believed the world was a grand stage and he had been handed the lead role by fate itself. In hindsight, I can see how people would assume he was a villain. But villains are supposed to be cold, shadows in expensive suits. Hank Scorpio was anything but cold. He remembered everyone's name. He shook hands with technicians and guards alike, clapping shoulders, asking about families, dogs, weekend plans. Once, he stopped mid-sentence during a briefing about missile trajectories just to compliment the janitor on how clean the floors looked that morning. That's just the kind of guy he was. He spoke about global domination the way other men talk about vacation plans. Casually, excitedly, with hand gestures that sent pens rolling off of my desk. Officially, I was hired as his assistant. The job was listed as a secretarial data entry job, but he insisted on calling me his assistant and said he would fire the guy who posted the ad for making the Globex Corporation look sexist and misogynistic. I was responsible for scheduling meetings with ambassadors who pretended not to tremble. I would type up ransom notes and policy proposals in the same afternoon. So, yeah, he wasn't a saint, but he was a man who intended to bend the entire planet into a new shape, and I believed in that vision. But unofficially speaking, I was the closest thing he had to a girlfriend. Not in the dramatic way you might imagine. We didn't eat candlelit dinners overlooking cities in flames. Instead, we'd spend late nights in the office, while he paced barefoot across the floor, dictating letters to presidents while I tried to keep up with the rhythm of his thoughts. Sometimes he would lean against my desk and ask about my day. Once he brought me coffee because he said I looked tired. He even apologized when the doomsday alarm scared me once when I was about to eat my lunch, making me drop my sandwich. He even purchased a replacement from Mother Hubbard's sandwich cupboard. Those moments felt strangely normal. Even now, as I write this, as the pills are taking effect and my breath is quickening, and my hand tremors are getting worse, I still see him as the great boss and a great friend. That was the magic of Hank Scorpio. The world seemed to tremble beneath his shadow, yet sitting beside him felt like sitting beside the most enthusiastic man alive. And now the world insists he never existed. An insidious veil of forgetfulness has settled in Springfield, like fog creeping through an abandoned town. It curls through conversation, slips into thoughts, and quietly smothers anything connected to his name. The effect was subtle at first. I'd mention him in passing to people, and they would pause for a moment, brows furrowing slightly, like someone trying to recall the name of an actor from an old movie. Then they'd shrug and ask, "Hank who?" The first time I heard those words, I laughed. I assumed they were joking. The second time, I felt a bit annoyed, but rationalised that they probably just hadn't heard of him in Springfield. The third time it happened, my stomach turned cold. Yeah, since the accident, I had been hospitalised, in a coma for 6 months. But that's not long enough for everyone to simply forget. I reached out to people who should have remembered him better than anyone. Presidents, diplomats, corporate titans who once negotiated with him through trembling video calls. I sent letters, emails. I made phone calls that stretched late into the night while rain rattled against my windows. Every response was on the same level of confusion. Hank who? And I've never met someone with that name, and I have eidetic memory. They had to be lying. But creepily, their voices carried genuine confusion. One man I asked chuckled politely and asked if I meant a senator. Another suggested I might be confusing reality with a TV show. I remember sitting there, with the phone still pressed to my ear long after the call had ended, listening to the hollow dial tone as something deep inside my chest began to unravel. But the worst moment, the moment when the last fragile thread of certainty snapped, was when I found Homer Simpson. The man who once stood shoulder to shoulder with Hank in the blazing heart of the compound. I remember that day vividly. Alarms screaming, technicians running, the reactor room glowing like the inside of a star, while Homer adjusted the controls, with powdered sugar still dusting his fingers. I didn't get why, but Hank adored him. I just put up with him. Hank even had me put the nickname of Mr. Simpson in the system be the most reliable man in America. I, of course, obliged. But I thought and still think the man is an idiot, a buffoon, the reason Hank's plan failed. I found Homer sitting at a bar stool in Moe's Tavern. I had heard he frequented the bar, a weird choice personally. When I was a college girl in Springfield Heights Institute of Technology, I'd go to the Guild Truffle. Everyone would. Moe's was a dive, and Moe himself would always hit on me and my friends if I was forced to go to meet some of my guy friends. But Mr. Simpson had chosen to drink here. Here, where the air smelled of stale beer and burnt grease. A cracked neon sign buzzed overhead, casting a faint white glow across his round, sleepy face. A brilliantly intelligent man like Hank should not have made friends with someone who enabled Moe's awful behaviour. A dirty and dusty beer was in front of him, with a peanut shell floating in it. When I asked him about Hank Scorpio, he blinked at me slowly. I described the compound, the reactor that he was literally in charge of maintaining. The day he nearly triggered a meltdown while Hank cheered like a proud coach. Homer stared at me for a long moment. Then he shrugged, said it sounded like a weird dream, and went back to his beer. I left the tavern just as Moe was hanging up the phone, angry at some punk that made him look stupid by calling out a fake name. My friend Jimbo and I would do that as kids, so it was cosmic karma for Moe's misogyny. I felt as if gravity itself had shifted, though. I drove to Cypress Creek after that. I hadn't before, because it was such a long drive, but I had to know. I drove to the house that Hank had given Mr. Simpson. I remembered the address so clearly. I had printed the lease and signed it over to the Simpsons. 15201 Maple Systems Road, with a 2-car garage, all the newest in self-cleaning technology, including that dirt-patrolling vacuum cleaner, and I distinctly remember Hank ordering me to find an architect and builder to put another story on the house after Mr. Simpson did something that I wasn't allowed to talk about. There were rumours that he had us killed a secret agent, but there's no way that incompetent boob could even catch a cold, let alone a government agent. But when I reached the street, there was only an ordinary suburban house. White siding, a crooked mailbox, a plastic flamingo in the yard. The kind of house that disappears into the background of every neighbourhood. It was definitely the right address. I had checked it twice. But this building had been here for years. New owners? I asked them, and the new owners told me as much. It had been here for years. They also had no idea who I was talking about, but gave me the details of the previous owners, Homer and Marge Simpson. So how could this all be made up if the homeowners knew the Simpsons? Even Marge had no memory of anything else when I called at the Simpsons' residence. She listened politely while I tried to explain, her towering blue hair casting a long shadow across the porch. When I finished, she smiled the sad smile people give strangers who are clearly unwell. Their children, I was never told their names, but I remembered their faces. They stared at me with the same quiet curiosity reserved for street performers and confused tourists. That was when the paranoia truly took effect. Because if the world could forget Hank Scorpio, what chance did I have? I had to find at least one person who agreed with me. But no. A co-worker who insisted we had never met. An apartment lease that no longer existed in the landlord's records. Photographs where faces had been rearranged. But I have a few unaltered ones. They're over on my window ledge, and there's even one on this table right beside me as I write this. Wait, what the hell? In it, as I remember, I am standing in a bright sunlight with my arm lifted slightly, curved as though resting on someone's shoulder, but there's no one there. Just empty air. How is that possible? I remember the moment perfectly. Hank had just finished explaining a plan involving orbital lasers and unusually trained iguanas. I actually laughed so hard that the camera shook. Yet the photograph shows only me, smiling beside nothing. Sometimes, late at night, I hear sounds that should not exist anymore. The distant hum of generators, the faint wail of sirens, buried beneath the wind. Once, I even heard footsteps in the hallway outside my bedroom door, followed by a familiar voice softly laughing, the same easy laugh that used to echo through the compound corridors. When I opened the door, the hallway was empty. Only the kitchen lights flickering, like tired stars. Days turned into nights as I wandered through archives, abandoned offices, and barren fields where the compound should have stood. Everywhere I went, the same answer waited for me like an open grave. Nothing. No records. No witnesses. No Hank Scorpio. And now, something worse is happening. My memories are beginning to rot. His voice echoes strangely in my mind now, stretched and warped like an old tape recording left too close to a magnet. His face flickers in fragments, the curve of his smile, the flash of his eyes, but the full image refuses to stay together. Sometimes I stand in front of the mirror and feel an awful, creeping fear, because I cannot quite remember what I looked like yesterday. Perhaps that is the truth of it. Perhaps Hank Scorpio was an error in the machinery of the world, a man too large, too bright, too impossible to remain. And now the universe is correcting itself, one memory at a time. But my coma paused the decay of my memories. I realize soon there will be no record of him, just as there will be no record of me. The lamp beside my desk flickers again, The light trembles across the walls, like something breathing slowly in the dark. Outside, the town continues its quiet life, unaware that an entire chapter of history has already been devoured by silence. My hands feel strangely calm now. The terror has faded into something softer, a quiet acceptance. So I take this pen and place its tip against the paper one final time, a parting gift to a world that has turned its back on me and Hank Scorpio. They may forget who I was, and I hope they do. I'm not, I never will be, Hank Scorpio. But perhaps these words will linger just a little longer than memory itself. May you remember, for I no longer have the strength to try. Goodbye.